My name is John Walubengo, currently the Dean Faculty of Computing and IT at Multimedia University. I'm going to be moderating this session. I hope we have an interactive session so that we can all learn from each other. Very quickly, on my left here is Susan Mocheche. She is representing the Director General from CCK, who could not be with us today. This session was supposed to be in the afternoon, so it caught a lot of people off guard. Next should have been Meshack Kidenda. I'm reading from page 24 of your main document, who is also not here. I don't know if he was caught up in the same mix-up, and Engineer Joseph Ndakayo. But we have Luis Otieno. I don't know if you are the current country manager or you're representing Kunle Awosika. Maybe you'll tell us when you have a chance to talk. And finally, Mr. Nigel Bruin, who is the Director of Business Consulting, Huawei Technologies. The way I want us to run this, I'll have like 15 minutes just to walk you through, I believe, a 60 or 70-page document that is on that particular website. So I'll try to pick out the main issues to facilitate our conversations. And I've summarized in front of you the main issues, starting with the definition that was adopted. Adopted because broadband has many definitions. What is broadband in my village in Western Kenya is not broadband for somebody in Sweden. So for the Kenyan situation, it was decided that the definition, the working definition, at least for the next 5 years, will be that broadband is providing connectivity, internet, presumably connectivity, that is always on and delivers a minimum of 5 Mbps for the rural communities and 40 Mbps in urban areas. Subsequently, there were some targets because it's one thing to provide high-quality connectivity, and it's quite another to have the same connectivity adopted or used by the community. So there was some penetration targets of providing this broadband access to 35% of our households in the next 5 years. I think the current CCK statistics indicate that this is very low, just around 1%. So you can imagine the challenge we have ahead of us. In the same document, there are actually 5 thematic areas that were highlighted. And the first one talks about infrastructure. With infrastructure comes connectivity and, of course, the access devices, whether they are laptops, smartphones, etc. There are a lot of issues around infrastructure, particularly from the telecommunication perspective. Some of them cut through across the other thematic themes, particularly on policy and regulatory affairs. But some of the issues that the operators were sharing when this particular document was being developed was that at a national level, the power supply to telecom equipment is not only expensive, but it's very unreliable. And what this means for the operators is that they have to incur an additional cost just to make sure that your communication continues to be available. There was also the issue that the civil works, the impact of civil works have on telecom operators from the equipment perspective. For example, when you want to maybe bury some fiber There are issues to do with getting waylifts. There are issues to do with maybe the competing telecom operators going through the same place. Today, Safaricom maybe cuts through Huru Highway, a particular point near, let's say, the Grand Regency, I don't know what it's called now, Liko, I think, Liko. Tomorrow morning, Airtel buries a similar fiber in exactly the same place, and the next day, Jamii does the same. So there's need to synergize between the telco operators and the civil works, and that's why we thought Engineer Meshack Kidenda from National Highway Authority would have given us his insights regarding such issues. On the content side, in this very same document, there was the idea that you may have the infrastructure, but if the community has nothing to go online for, if they have no motivation to log on, then you're wasting your time. So it was decided that content is a pertinent issue that we should look at, and ways and means of encouraging local content, particularly from the e-government perspective. And there are very many examples that are successful in that space. For example, the annual ritual of Standard 8 and O-level or Form 4 exams. Once they are released, they are put on the education website, and there's a jump in terms of usage, in terms of parents, students across the country accessing that particular content. You can imagine the impact if we had 5, 10 of similar contents, particularly from the government side. I mean, that would spur usage to unprecedented levels. There was also the next theme, capacity building, which looked at the community. Do they know how to use these ICTs? Again, you may have the infrastructure, you may have the content, but if the general populace does not know how to send an SMS, then you have a problem. You may have e-government services, but if the civil servants don't know how to populate the same or how to use the same, then you have a problem. So capacity building was also a key thematic area where in the broadband strategy, they're looking at initiatives to increase digital literacy, training both at primary, secondary, all the way to university level. It was noted that at university, there was need to have very high-end specialized skills to be able to address some of the emerging issues that a broadband infrastructure in a country may present. Moving on the policy and the legal and regulatory side, we have some of the issues highlighted regarding spectrum, where most operators felt that the regulator spectrum policy is punitive. The licensing fees surrounding that space are a bit on the higher side. To what extent can this be addressed so that perhaps the benefit accrued from paying less spectrum fees could be passed on to the consumer? There was the issue of open access, and this ties in together with the issue of sharing infrastructure. Why should the telecom operator bury the same fiber in the same place at the same time? A single strand of fiber really can serve all their needs. So is it perhaps time we looked at open access models where the infrastructure is shared? And I believe the government has recently published a spectrum policy that is under discussion, which proposes that the national broadband network is provided under open access frameworks, where operators jointly own that infrastructure and run it through some arrangement, and then compete at the retail level. The infrastructure may be there, and once it starts getting to be used, then the quality issues come in. The congestion that arises from usage is obvious. So the issues of what the regulators are doing to address quality become important as the usage increases. Then there was the issue of bills. The uptake of, ICTs that are anticipated from this broadband network present difficult challenges to the community. For example, security. Do we have, for example, E-Crime Act? Do we have Data Protection Act? To what extent are these acts in the pipeline? Finally, at the thematic level, we had financing and legal issues. No, this legal should not be there, sorry. It's just financing issues. Funding. The National Broadband Strategy, I think, anticipated close to 250 billion in the first 5 years to actualize. There are some specific projects that were highlighted that required funding. So the discussion will be, how are we going to fund this? A target of 5% spend for ICT services was proposed within 5 years. At the moment, the government spends less than 1%, about 0.5% of our national budget on ICT issues. There was proposal to push this spend upwards to 5% in an effort to address the funding gap. There was also proposal for floating infrastructure bonds, encouraging venture capitalism. And last but not least is the issue of Universal Service Fund, where all the operators contribute a certain percentage towards developing the broadband infrastructure, particularly to serve the so-called non-commercial areas, because people in remote counties where it may not make economic sense, really, to invest, still need broadband access. So how do we reach those areas? So there was the issue of universal service funds. So in a nutshell, that's basically a broad overview of the National Broadband Strategy. The detailed document is as listed on the slide there. And I would now like to basically get some reactions from the panelists, maybe 5 minutes each, where we want to hear from them and their perspectives, what it is they're doing to actualize this very grand vision, perhaps the challenges they are facing, and any proposed solution. I'll start with Susan. Please give us your reaction on the National Broadband Strategy.
So the Director General was expected here, but he unfortunately could not make it. And so I just learned about 30 minutes ago that I will be stepping in for him. And at that moment, the thing that came to my mind was the Girl Guide motto, always be prepared. So I said, here we are. I'll dig into that for inspiration. Essentially, I think I'm just going to focus on the regulatory perspective of broadband, and perhaps just try to share with you, about what the regulator is doing, plans to do, to make broadband access to all a reality. And I hope I'll just take about 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll basically be focusing on the issue of spectrum, the issue of affordability, access, and cybersecurity and privacy, the dynamics of a very competitive and robust market. And I have to touch on an enabling legislative and regulatory framework that will help us realize our aspirations of the National Broadband Strategy. So, of course, the first thing that I must start with, and this is where a lot of operators have an interest in spectrum. We can't talk about broadband in a developing country without talking about spectrum, because we'll be relying heavily on wireless technologies to deliver broadband to all. And so what the regulator is doing towards this, we are counting on the digital dividends that we will be accruing from the digital migration process that is ongoing. So we hope that the spectrum bands that will be availed will be allocated specifically for the use of broadband. We are also in the process of migrating some users, some specific user groups that perhaps I may not talk about here, from certain sweet spots that again will be released to the market for the use and of broadband services. Again, one of the things that the spectrum strategy noted was we lacked some guidelines on spectrum, and particularly from a regulatory perspective. And I'm so glad to report to you that we have since now developed a guideline that will soon be shared with the rest of the stakeholders. And of course, we're also trying to align it to the spectrum policy that the ministry just released. And what this will do is, I think for the first time, you'll have more clarity about the availability of the scarce resources. We will be able to give you some roadmap on where we are going, perhaps in the next 5 years, in terms of what spectrum will be available and what allocation mechanisms we are going to use. We are also reviewing the price of spectrum generally, because we want to eliminate any barrier that makes spectrum unavailable or that ends up having a retrogressive effect in terms of the pricing of broadband services. So you will soon be called upon to give your comments and your inputs on the spectrum guidelines by the Commission. And we are also looking at availing some new bands for the use of Wi-Fi, because of course you know that Wi-Fi is a very robust technology for broadband as well. So that process is also ongoing, and I'm sure that a lot of this will be presented in the spectrum guidelines, because we will try to be very specific as possible in terms of what our spectrum is actually going to be availed. On the issue of an enabling legislative environment, and specifically regulatory environment, you're aware that there's a lot of initiatives that have been ongoing. We are still having the discussions on open access, and I also believe that is one of the issues that we'll be consulting with stakeholders on. And the whole issue is just to ensure that there's fair access to bottleneck infrastructure that is not easily replicable by a number of players, to ensure that there is fair treatment to accessing this infrastructure. And of course, the issue of infrastructure sharing, right now I think we will just be focusing on enforcement. You're aware that we have a code of practice that was developed and is owned by the key players in the industry. And I think that these are very important in generally just promoting infrastructure development and helping in pushing the extension of services more and more into the hinterland. Issues of quality of service, of course, cannot be forgotten. They are really at the heart of the regulatory work. Broadband, as Walubengo had mentioned, is really about the experience. Kenyans have to get the true broadband experience. Of course, the strategy has come out with rather ambitious speeds, really, in terms of the numerical definitions. But I would imagine that the emphasis and what really would guide the regulator as well is the experience. Are we able to deliver a service that enables Kenya to do what is envisaged on the broadband platform? And so we shall see, and we are having a lot of discussion within the regulator on our enforcement mechanisms as far as quality of services is concerned. And of course, we also have to talk about issues of fair competition and equality of treatment. For a long time, our legislative framework was very silent on this, and there's very little latitude that we have had as a regulator to deal with some of the competition issues that have emerged over the years. But the recent revision or amendment to the Act that came into force in February this year has now finally provided that kind of platform. The development of the subsequent regulations is now ongoing, and I'm sure it's an issue that touches at the heart of the very many small players in this market. You want to see more fair treatment, more equitable access to big operator networks. And so you'll be delighted to know that we'll soon be having regulations in place, and that of course gives us the space to begin to enforce. And just in conclusion on issues to do with regulations, really the idea here is for us to be as creative as possible. We are very alive to the fact that the market is increasingly becoming more complex, of course driven by technology and driven by many other factors that are consumer-centric. And so we are alive to that, and going forward, we are being more responsive also to our local conditions in terms of the kind of regulatory space and regulatory framework that we adopt. I will also talk about affordability and what we are doing about this. For us, the key thing is to try and understand the whole broadband market, interrogating the whole value chain that makes up the broadband service. And the point is to try and find if we can identify any price barriers, particularly at the wholesale level. And I can tell you that we'll soon be undertaking another market study just to interrogate the entire value chain. You're aware that about 2-3 years ago, we concluded the market study on the mobile or voice services. And that, of course, led to the immediate decrease of voice tariffs. And the whole point is not to be a very punitive regulator, rather it's in the spirit of just ensuring that we identify any bottlenecks, if any, and of course use the appropriate regulatory tools to address that. I think we also want to recognize the role that the KEXP plays. As a regulator, we have tried to provide a very conducive environment for the KEXP so that more and more content is localized. We appreciate the strong correlation there is in terms of having the content local and the cost of services. I know that there will be a significant reduction and a significant saving on the part of operators when more and more of their content is localized. And of course, we have to appreciate from a user perspective, when we deal with the issues of latency, reduction that come with localizing content, then the consumer has a better experience. And really, as a regulator, the focus is to try and make the environment as enabling as possible for our KEXP. In terms of access, telecommunications in this market is largely driven by the private sector. In fact, wholly driven by private sector investment. But then, of course, we are also alive to the fact that private investment is limited to the areas that the investors find commercially viable. So we are very alive to the fact that there are areas that are not commercially viable. And this is, again, it was confirmed to us through an access gap study that we did in 2009. And may I also take this opportunity to just mention that we will soon be doing another access gap in the next 1 year to just update the network coverage in this country and identify what the true gaps are. And basically to close the gaps and to extend services in these very expensive areas to deploy tech infrastructure, the Universal Service Fund was created. It has had a few challenges in its operationalization, but it should soon be operationalized as soon as the Universal Service Advisory Council is put in place. And I believe the ministry is put up an advert inviting anyone who's interested to be a member of the council to put in their application. Because again, the law has been very clear about the criteria, but I would just mention so that if you have an interest, you could perhaps visit the ministry's website. So as soon as the USAC is in place, the fund should begin operationalization. And we are very alive to, government's commitment to a digital Kenya. And so we have to basically ensure that this is achieved. Finally, and I'm sorry I've taken a bit of time, the real final, on the issue of cybersecurity and privacy, we are actively involved in the establishment of the national public key infrastructure. I think it has now just reached its completion, and this will generally just ensure security at the cyberspace. And we are also working on the KSAT for electronic signature. These are things that are just coming to maturation very soon. And I think finally, consumer protection, always at the heart of the regulator. This has been one of those issues that has been a bit at the back burner, but I think increasingly it's coming to the fore, and you can get more details regarding consumer protection in terms of the statistics of how many complaints we receive, how the responsiveness and the turnaround times have been. You can find that information, and we know that this will be a very key agenda as we move into the increased broadband space. Thank you very much.
I'm sure the DG will be very proud of you. Despite ambushing you, you've done some justice. So Louis Otieno, you may not have all the time, just 4 to 5 minutes. Floor is yours.
But I do want to start by noting that we have Susan here, we have Walubengo on the panel, and I see a few other people who are involved at the beginning of the process of coming up with this national broadband strategy. I think it's important for everybody to appreciate the process that we went through. And I'm very pleased to see the outcome of that process. It was a pretty comprehensive process. I had the privilege of sitting with super clever people out in Naivasha for about a week. And so I'm not surprised to see the document that I see here in terms of the scope and the comprehensive nature that is. So I want to start by saying that. But I also want us to ask ourselves some basic questions, like why are we doing this, okay? Why a broadband strategy? I think all of you in this room will be familiar with the data that's floating around that basically indicates that in developing countries like ours, a 10% increase in broadband penetration directly translates to something like 1.3% upside on GDP growth. That's important. We're talking about Vision 2030. That's one of the key measurables. Our ability to grow to 10% GDP growth and sustain it. So one easy way to do it is this way. So having said that and looking at the thematic areas, it's important for us, and the thematic areas, understandably, tend to be more what I'm going to call supply side driven, okay? Driven by government and people like that for the reasons of government, okay? It's important for us to recognize there's a role here for what I'm going to call demand side participation. That's you, private sector sitting in this room, okay? Much as we are seeing all the ideas that government is proposing in this document, it's important for us to sit back and look and ask ourselves, where do we fit in, okay? Because the interesting thing about supply side is people are driven by their own motivations. And to the extent that you're doing what you're motivated to do, as long as there's a good referee, regulator, things will happen, and we'll be less concerned about how do we finance this and so forth. I'll give an example a little later in my comment here around that. But that's important, okay? We've heard about the notion, I'll give an example of trade. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the fact that only 12% of inter-Africa trade amounts to only 12% of GDP in Africa. 12%. The number I was surprised to learn in Brussels last week was, for Europe, it's 72%. European countries trading amongst themselves. It's 60% in Asia, it's 40% in North America. We're 12%. With 1 billion people, you almost get to a point where you can consider forgetting about the rest of the world and consider just increasing your trade. Because by increasing your trade by 2 or 3%, inter-Africa trade, that's in excess of all net FDI to the continent every year. Think about it. So landing that here locally, we have devolution going on. The last time I checked, the amount of contribution that Nairobi County, Mombasa County, Kiambu County make into this country is in excess, close to 70%, if I'm not wrong. If we want to grow, and if you want to create motivation for the utilization of this thing, of financing, of it, sustaining it, because it's about sustainability. It's about ensuring that we create the platforms that will allow Turkana to trade with Nairobi, that will allow Mandera to trade with Homa Bay, et cetera, for their own reasons. Don't even go there, they know why they do what they do. It's not our business to figure that out. Ours is to make sure that the infrastructure is there. So there's room for focus around the demand side dynamics that will make this sustainable. It's one thing to build it, it's another thing to sustain it. If you want to sustain things, one of the things to do is to drive affordability down. And affordability is typically driven down by economies of scale or volume and things like those, okay? So I wanted to just touch on that. And I'm going to use an example. One of the things I hate hearing is the laptop deal. And I'll tell you why, to me, it's an irritation when you call it a laptop deal. I won't even talk about the semantics about laptop versus devices versus lab versus whatever. That is a consumer element of it. To me, I look at it, for those who have seen, who have spent time with me know that this is how I position it. It's a device that's supposed to be consuming something, okay? So content, over some infrastructure, so connectivity. Somebody has to support that device, that connectivity, create that content. You need capacity building. Those are jobs, okay? If you had 5 companies created just to support devices that are going to be in counties, connectivity to the county, content development that is relevant to that county, that is that many more jobs, but not jobs and companies, but it's not just jobs and companies, it's jobs and companies in the county, okay? It's about inclusive development, all right? Then the last thing is financing, right? We have an opportunity for financial institutions to participate in this. I hate the idea that the current procurement rules force us to, okay, I'll wrap it up with that. The current procurement rules force us to look at this as a capex transaction. I need to spend 24-point-something billion to buy 1-point-something million. How about if it became something like you need to pay 10,000 shillings per child per month, and for that you get appropriate device, appropriate connectivity, appropriate content, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And it changes the whole thing, but procurement today doesn't allow us to do this. So I'll close by saying, I'm urging everybody to drive innovation, not just innovation in terms of technological innovation, innovation in terms of policies. So whether it's spectrum, utilization, procurement, innovation needs to change in terms of things. And I'll leave it at that, so we can go on a little later. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis, for that. A good round of applause for Louis. And very quickly now I want Nigel to give us his reaction, 5 minutes.
Let me just say I'm from Huawei, which you probably know as a large equipment supplier and manufacturer. I'm actually from the business consulting side of Huawei. That's a group of nearly 500 consultants we have within the company that we use as a resource to help our customers and governments to develop networks. So I have a very particular perspective on this. I spend all of my time helping companies and advising governments how to make successful NBNs and fiber rollouts. So I look at the strategic broadband plan, national broadband strategy. Very good document. Said all the right things, nice and aspirational, talked about opportunity, lifestyle, and so on. But I was looking for how to turn it into action. And there's a couple of things that caught my eye. It did say it was a strategic investment, so that's a good start. National broadband infrastructure should be strategic, and I see that very sense of strategic desire in there. And a framework for synchronizing planning. Very, very important. This is not going to be one ministry that does this, it's the whole of government. and it's going to be private sector as well. We have to find a way that we can bring all these different actors into play to deliver this. So it's a big, complicated project. It becomes almost more a question of project management than technology. This is not a technology problem. We know how to do the technology. It's a project management issue. So given the lack of time, and because I have some interesting things I want to talk about, I'll go on directly onto the points. Definition of broadband. Whenever I put recommendations on broadband, I always put a date by them. Because of broadband escalation, you have to say it's 20 megabits 2014. They always grow. So if you've said 5 megabits and 40, that's not bad, but that's brackets 2014, that will grow. Every example I can think of where we launched with a particular speed, it's just run away with us in terms of demand and the tariffs that are subsequently issued. I would start with fiber. If you're doing greenfield and you have nothing out there, fiber if you can, wireless for coverage. If you have good copper, I would make the most of that with the technologies we've got to build on copper. So I would reuse existing poles and infrastructure where you can. And we had one person mention Wi-Fi. There's a few people doing some quite interesting things with Wi-Fi. It's not a great telco solution, but it can cover a lot of area very cheaply. And that makes it attractive. And now we've got potentially white spaces for Wi-Fi, so next generation Wi-Fi could be very interesting to get a lot of coverage quickly. So that's one you might want to add to the plan. Infrastructure, connectivity devices. Power is a huge problem. The mobile people will tell you this, that remote power for base stations is terrifically expensive and drags the whole return of investment business case down to its knees. What with the trucks, the diesel, and the losses along the way, it's very expensive. So the best practice now is renewables for power, backed up with things like fuel cell. There are solutions to bring the price down. I suggest you align yourself with best practice on the power. Civil works, a huge showstopper if it's not managed properly. The simplest thing like bad maps, or someone claiming a right-of-way and not being able to move because of they own a strip of land. You need to get to grip with these problems very early on. I suggest you do a legal review, and I suggest you do some trial projects to pipe cleaner the process. Civil works can be a showstopper right there. And if it's laws and regulations, very difficult to change. I mean, even with government will and presidential intent, it can be hard to change them. So that's something I would advise. Content and innovation. I could spend an hour talking about this. I strongly agree with Louis and a few other people. The way I describe the internet is it's a platform for innovation. So you talk about how to measure the benefits. You cannot. I agree with Mark Walker this morning when he said they're intangible. I would say they're not only they're intangible, but they are diffuse. In fact, we don't even know what they are yet, because we haven't built the network. We don't know what people are going to do with this network. We have to leave this space for the unknown that people will fill with their energy and innovation. So that's a huge part of it as well. And one thing I know out there on content, Madam was talking about the One Government project and all these great single databases that are going to be secure. What I didn't see in there was commercial access to those databases and citizen access to those databases. I want to see government as a service. I want to see APIs into that so other people can innovate off those databases in a reasonably secure way. I would say once we've built the hardware, it then becomes a software problem. It's all about the local content. So a lot of countries, they suffer with more than 90% of the traffic going international. This becomes the bottleneck. How to solve that? You have to put a lot of focus on local content, and building up local caching and so on will take you so far, but building up local libraries, the education resources and so on, having it in the country is going to be the answer for that. Okay. Moving on, building capacity. I mean, the way I saw that was... 5 minutes. Oh, okay.
But you can't, 1 more minute grace period.
Okay. I would say one thing on open access. Open access is very good because it uses commercial pressures to drive it forward. It can be difficult to get right legally. So what I suggest is have open access definitely in the plan, but don't let it hold you up with the rollout. Perhaps have it as a phase 2 somehow, so that you can bring it in at a later stage. Don't let it stop the initial rollout, would be my advice on that one.
Thank you, Nigel. Some round of applause for Nigel. Finally, but not least, we have Engineer John Otatio, who has kindly agreed to step in for his boss. 5 minutes. What's the reaction from Kenya National Highway Authority?
Engineer Meshack Kidenda was to be with us here, but he has sent his message to me to pass to you. And I'll just go through it so that his message gets to you. Then I'll add what is there. His message states as follows. Road infrastructure is a key component of communication and economic development of any nation. The Vision 2030, that is the country's guiding policy, aspires to create an integrated communication and transport infrastructure, replete with state-of-the-art roads designs, railways, ports, waterways, and robust telecommunication network. Kenya's infrastructure network is currently adjudged to be of good quality with adequate connectivity, but low on density. As an authority, we are addressing this by increasing the intensity and functionality of the road network in the country so as to bring entire national road network to a good motorable condition. Without good roads and indeed infrastructure, movement in the economy will be impeded, and with this, ferrying of produce and other goods to the market will be severely curtailed, leading to transport bottlenecks and communication bottlenecks. Invariably, this will hamper economic growth. Indeed, in the Vision 2030, a well-functioning road network has been identified as an enabler for propelling the economy forward. With the support of bilateral trade partners, KENHA has completed key major projects and commenced other very important outlets. In the concluded fiscal year 2012-2013, we were able to deliver a number of key projects aimed at enhancing transport flow across the regions of the country. The most exciting was the completion of the ultra-modern Nairobi-Thika superhighway and the multinational Athi River Namanga Arusha road upgrade. Many other projects are under various implementation stages, such as the LAPSET. This is the one from Lamu to Isiolo, Merile River to Marsabit Turbi, and Turbi to Moyale. And the Northern Corridor transport improvement projects. It's Mau Summit, Kericho, Nyamasaria, Eldoret, Webuye, Malaba, and the Kisumu and Nairobi bypasses, among many others that are various implementation stages and define the value chain that KENHA hopes to implement as we support the Vision 2030. Presently, we are implementing strategies to ensure that projects are completed within the stipulated timelines to ensure that the public gets value for money. This includes close supervision of all ongoing projects as well as regular updates with the public and development partners to ensure that they remain appraised on project implementation progress. As we embark on the 6th year, we shall remain committed to delivering value to all Kenyans. We firmly remain committed to fulfilling our mandate of managing, developing, rehabilitating, and maintaining our roads together with our partners. We have already attained great success so far, and the only way for us to better what we have, the only way for us is to better what we have achieved so far. That was his message. Now, in the sector, we are now addressing the issues of infrastructure. Kenya National Highways, together with the other infrastructure development partners, have available to you a road reserve network of about 63,000 kilometers. This is what is available for the sector to put in their infrastructure development. I have data here on that one, but I think because of press of time, I'll not go through that. I'll go to what is affecting the sector as far as KENHA is concerned. Currently, our policy is to work to partner with the sector players in developing the infrastructure. This can be addressed at the planning stage. So we want the sector players at the very early stages of implementation. In the past, we have had to accommodate the sector after developing the infrastructure. It becomes very costly for the organization as sector players require. Those requirements, we now wish to have them at the planning stage. Let us have sector players partnering up and giving us what they need, what you require, so that we can incorporate them in our planning. Lastly, I think you are aware of what we require, and they are available in our website, www.kenha.co.ke. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give the panelists a big round of applause. Say your name, organization, and if possible, the panelist you're directing the question to. Let's start. Oh, you already have the mic. Fine.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Adam Sheikh, County Executive Committee in charge of ICT at Kwale County. And my question goes to the engineer from KENHA. I know many of you have traveled to come this way through the Kenya ferry, and you've seen the problems that you came across at Kenya ferry. We've been hearing about Dongokundu bypass for so many years. And I would like the engineer to, as part of the infrastructure development, to give us an update on the Dongokundu bypass, and when is it going to start, how long will it take, and when will it finish? Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Note the questions. Be thinking of the answer next.
Thank you, Chair. My name is
Sergon. Fine, proceed.
Okay. My name is John Sergon. I was one of the members of the broadband strategy. Thank you, Susan, for a good presentation. I was just wondering, maybe the gentleman from the roads would tell us, who keeps the record of all these cables where they are? Is it, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, who keeps, if we wanted to know all the cables right now, who would know where they are?
Good question.
Okay, I have the mic.
You want to respond to? Okay, fine, Nyaki. Just because you're near. Very quickly.
No, it's actually very quick, and thank you, John, because I also know the broadband strategy, and I'm glad the person of roads is sitting there, but this is also directed to Susan. From the broadband strategy, how are we ensuring that people like the person sitting there from roads understands what's in that strategy and understands the importance of shared infrastructure?
Okay.
Thank you. It took long for me to ask. My name is Stephen Maura Duati. I am a central banker. I happen to have knowledge in both engineering and legal. And my question is based on this thematic area of capacity and digital literacy and going to policy and legal. I do see that as technical people, especially we in ICT, we're very good at hardware and software. Mm-hmm. And we seem to be ascribing too much to those two parameters. I want to go to the legal side and indicate there is, because we are in a workshop on breaking barriers, there is a major barrier that nobody seems to be addressing, and that is the so-called legal barrier. And the legal barrier, I want to give it in the way of example. When we were doing Lika Road, we had to bring down certain constructions, including Nakumat and the rest. Currently, we do have some structures that you are not seeing, and these are coming in the way of competition. So when you talk about opening up, there are people who are putting in a lot of resources in legal to fight back. And therefore, the barrier I want to allude to as we go through this workshop is legal infrastructure. And the area of legal infrastructure, which is unfortunate because it seems to be not represented here. For example, you've not seen it fit to call the Office of the Attorney General here, the Office of the DPP, and the Office of the Chief Justice. And in that, what we are seeing, and it's not just Thika Road, you see Gareria, we couldn't move on the road because somebody has put up a house, and the same thing goes to Cabanas. I want to say one of the weaknesses I'm identifying with our regulator, the CCK, is that you are drawing very good regulations, but I think it is time you call in a multi-sectoral representation to assist in drafting legal instruments, legal regulatory instruments that will ensure jurisprudence and constitutionalism. Because what we are seeing, you are talking infrastructure from highways, from what have you, but the legal infrastructure, as we exit from this workshop, the legal infrastructure is a hindrance, and as we talk, you are in court every day. And if we do not educate, now I talk about the capacity issue, if we do not educate the judges, and we do not educate those people who are handling the legal side of this, they will always be telling you you are unconstitutional and we are not going to move. So in the next 5 years, people who want to stop you from moving will stop you in court. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maura. I've lost one question. I had 4 people. Okay, let's let the panelists respond. We had a question from Kwale County for Engineer Ndogokundu bypass. We had a question from Sergon. These cables crisscrossing the roads, who's keeping records on that? We had a question also for Susan with regard to how do we ensure that the broadband strategy is actually understood by all stakeholders. And finally, Maura on legal issues. We actually had a whole chapter on legal issues, but not from the perspective you're bringing out. So maybe it may go back to Susan. Let's start with the engineer.
Thank you very much. Dongokundu, I think this one is at a very advanced stage. Route identification was done, designs are done, but now we have logistical problems of resettlement. There are people who will be displaced. There are people who require to be compensated because their land will be utilized. That requires a lot of steps. Some of them require maybe to be cancelled before they are displaced. Paying them alone is not enough. They have to be cancelled because you are leaving your ancestral land to go elsewhere. So these are some of the problems. Removal of encumbrances, like my colleague there said, when we start to open up the route, even where the route is actually public land, you find some people had encroached because there was a period when any free land was free to those who are able to acquire them. But now we are trying to acquire them. We are trying to regain those lands which were improperly grabbed. I think some have even taken us to court. During the first phase of opening up, we were taken to court, like he has said. Maybe we also need to bring on board our legal partners at that level. So Dongokundu is on the way. Funding is available. The problem is the logistics. It will be there. It's a matter of time. I go to who is keeping records of cables. At Kenya National Highways Authority, there are some requirements we give to developers. When you have identified the route which you want to put your cables, one of the things we are requiring you to submit is as-built drawings. Those as-built drawings show exactly where your cable will pass, at what level, from where to where. So as we have that information, we are getting this information from the service providers. So we expect a similar record to be with the service provider. To be accurate, we are also asking for the UTM coordinates, which you get with the GPS. If you go with the GPS, you can get the coordinates of where you are coming from, where you are turning, where you are climbing, where you are underground, where you are above ground. We keep that data for the sake of not interfering, one partner interfering with the other partner among the service providers. Then we have, how are we ensuring what the broadband strategy is, that the broadband strategy is understood by all? In KENHA, we have the point of intersection where we are sharing. I think that's where our understanding is supposed to begin. We would not want to go into the gritty-nitty of the broadband service provision. But when it comes into the road reserve, from that point, we try as much as possible to understand the impact of what you want to put on the road reserve, because the road reserve is for roads. And when we give you authority to place it there, we also request you, when we want to do a road, the road gets first priority. But we'll always try as much as possible to make sure we provide an alternative. Even when we are doing road route acquisition, we normally allow for 1 meter on either side of the road reserve for service provision. So basically, that is as far as I would want to go into the understanding of broadband provision. Then the legal barriers, it's true, even us in the road infrastructure, we're almost getting grounded by legal cases being taken to court, even where somebody is on the wrong, but you find because of human rights, it still has to be heard before we can proceed. But road investment is a very costly investment. You might find a case, a very minor case, is keeping a project like Dongokundu, which is a multi-billion project. You have seen it with the railways, the new railway line we want to put up. The thing is being disturbed by all sorts of issues. Same case with the road sector. So I think it is true that the legal barrier is becoming a menace to us, even where it is not necessary that it should be there. Thank you.
Okay, Susan?
Yeah, thank you very much for that observation by Dr. Adea. And I think the specific issue that she was alluding to with regards to the collaboration with KENHA and other players in the transport sector, or roads specifically, is the issue of collaboration in the construction of ducts that will be used for the deployment of telecom infrastructure. Because I think what the strategy basically appreciated is the fact that it would significantly lower the cost of investment if the national government took up the responsibility of building the ducts as they are building the roads, because indeed ducts would really form a very small portion of the total cost of building the road. And you know, just to be a bit optimistic, I think the fact that we are having KENHA sitting here is just showing that we are already beginning to have this conversation. In the past, we would not even be thinking about partners such as KENHA in discussions like this, and I want to really recognize that this is what the strategy has done this far, but it also places the burden on the institution responsible for implementation of the national broadband strategy to now actively engage and really articulate what the desired impact or the desired results are from the key stakeholders that were highlighted in the national broadband strategy. So I hope that this will be an opening for further collaboration and discussion with KENHA. And I just want to also recognize that, you know, the issues of the legal challenges that we are facing as a country, we are obviously become increasingly litigious. And of course, it's creating a lot of inertia in some of the key sectors. I mean, you can see what is now facing the ICT sector. We've just heard from the roads. And it's an issue that perhaps requires further thought. And of course, collaboration now becomes almost inevitable. I think we're increasingly going to become like the Western countries where, you know, before you begin any activity, you want to read through the dotted lines, you want to truly understand the legislative framework, you really want to engage with all the key stakeholders. So I think we are just in a process of transition, because you are aware that this has been largely brought about by our new constitution, which really echoes strongly on the issues of you know, fundamental human rights. And, it has gotten to us and we want to go to court over everything. So I think we're just in a process. And eventually, hopefully, we will either settle down or get very smart as government in the way that we do our business to just really reduce that burden on ourselves.
Okay, thank you. I think I just want to take 3 burning questions, if
Excuse
any.
me. Can I clarify?
Yes, Engineer, proceed.
Let me just clarify one point she has mentioned, the issue of ducts. In the director's speech, we have mentioned to you the ongoing road corridors where we can help. If we get your requirements at the planning stage, the ducts will be provided at the same time the road is being done, and it will be at no cost to you. But if you come after the road is already built, then now we don't have any other projects going on. It means the sector players who require that duct will have to meet the cost. This is why it is important for you to understand that you come at the planning stage so that we plan for your needs at the planning stage so that they can be implemented together with the road. That will be done at that cost if it is at that stage. Thank you.
I'm Daniel Ingolan from Turkana County, in charge of ICT. Mine is how can ICT improve the problem of doctors in counties by trying to network so that you have a doctor at the county headquarters. You get a patient, and then from there you can teleconference with somebody who is 1,000 miles away from you, and the patient gets diagnosed.
Okay, thank you. I'll throw that to Louis, maybe, ICT in health. We had a question here.
My name is Engineer Andrew Kemosi from Orange Telecom. And first of all, I would like to congratulate and say thank you to KENHA for the good job they're doing for this country. However, as operators, we have our fibers along the road. They know where they are and we know where they are. The only unfortunate thing is that what we are requesting is for us to have a good relationship with them when they're building the road, so they don't cut the cables. We work together, move the roads the way they do for diversion for people to use the road before as they are doing the other road. And we have been having a lot of difficulties and we have lost a lot of money. And for the future, which they have said they are going to have a duct done, like the big projects, like the one you're talking of LabSet, we'll appreciate if you have the ducts all the way to Turkana and all other places, because broadband without fiber will not move quickly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Last. That was more of a comment. The last question.
Yeah, Ben Roberts from Liquid Telecom. So we just heard you say if you're building a road, we need to specify the ducts at the planning stage as the telco industry. I think the question is, how do we know what projects are being planned? What are the forums for engagement to get in those planning decisions at the very beginning?
So I'll take the opportunity to pitch a further session coming up, because I think there's a session called Reimagining or Re-engineering Healthcare Solutions and Education. That's actually the session that Kunle is going to be speaking, and I think it's tomorrow or something. So there'll be a little bit more detail on that. But the reason I like that, and one of the things I like about the fact that we have CIOs at a county level, is it's back to the point I was making earlier on, which is that we are now beginning to hear articulation of demand side issues. And the answer should be, in this room, I don't know. It should always be that there's somebody out there who we need to communicate this to, who needs to come with an innovative response to that. But for them to do that, they need to have the infrastructure we're talking about here to give them the options in terms of how would you answer that question, how would you solve it. And it needs to just be an answer, it needs to be a business opportunity for somebody to make. But I want to take the second here to kind of try to put together some of the questions I have heard about the infrastructure stuff. Because, and I'm being, maybe as you're answering that, engineer, you can answer this to me. Because I always smile when I go to a lot of buildings in town or in visiting friends and things like that, and I look at beautiful buildings. And then invariably you will see a duct going around the house. It's like they never thought about this at the beginning of anything. Can we make an assumption that any road must have a duct? I don't have to call you to tell you this is where the duct is going to be. If the road is here,
Put a duct.
800 meters from this spot on the road, there is a duct, period. We don't have to have that conversation. Because I don't see how wrong you can be in terms of when you're building that road, you have that duct, okay? So is there any reason why we don't just make that assumption?
Yeah, actually, engineer, that ties in with what the guy from Liquid Telecom was asking. How do you know what are your plans with regards to road infrastructure so that the operators can plug in? At what point do you engage them?
Thank
do
you.
You collaborate?
I think our plans are in the road sector investment program, the booklet, but also in our website. So anytime you want to know the plans we have, just check our website. Also, you can visit our offices. There are 10 offices countrywide, including the headquarters. There are 11. Also, you can visit our designers in various floors in our offices. So our programs are, I think, can be accessed. Now, when we come to the issue of provision of ducts, you know, road construction is a very expensive affair, but it opens the countryside. So what happens is that at the beginning, we are dealing with maybe 3 or 4 major towns along the road. What we are doing at the moment is providing cross ducts at a certain interval. Like the Huawei has cross ducts. And wherever we have provided cross ducts will not allow you to create new ones, because where we have put them, you'll find, like the Highway is a very wide road. Yeah. So if we start putting ducts all over, it will be too much. And I'm sure everybody wants the shortest route to the installation. Yeah. But we are providing cross ducts. The ducts which we have not provided because we want your input are the longitudinal ducts. These are ducts which are running along the road. How would I know what kind of duct to put? We have to work together. So what I would request is, can you initiate, come to us, tell us this is the kind of duct we want. This will require you to partner, because we can't provide ducts for each individual. There are so many service providers along the road corridor. We have the power people, we have the water people, both domestic, clean water and foul water. Then we have the rest of the service providers who are also very many. So I think the best thing is partnerships. So that when it is, for example, power people, they come with one duct, we'll provide it. If it is data or voice or whatever type of cable, it is good for you to give us the type of duct you want. Because if we provide one duct and we allow power to put it there, sewage water, what kind of duct would that be? I am imagining a very huge duct, and that will be very expensive. So I think the best thing is let's partner up, maybe as the ICT sector, and come up with one standard type of duct. Yeah. Give it to us, we'll cost it, and see whether it can be provided. That's the starting point.
My name is Fiona Songa, CEO of the Telecommunication Service Providers Association of Kenya, that brings together all the infrastructure deployment companies. We do have a standard of what we expect in terms of a duct that would carry more than the current providers, allowing for futuristic growth. Unfortunately, we've not been able to get through to you. So I'm happy that you're saying that, because what you're asking for is there, and the association will come in and engage on behalf of the industry.
Thank you, Fiona.
Fiona has literally taken the words out of my mouth, because I wanted to just give the assurance to KENHA that I think we will get together, and I believe we shall provide the leadership, and I can see Victor here. I am committing him because his institution is absolutely strategic in this discussion. I think we shall put together a team that will begin to engage you and in collaboration with the stakeholders.
So with that, I want to turn over the podium to the MC to guide us on what next. Thank you very much, and thank you to the audience for a very good session. Thank you.